Welcome, dreamer, to Saga Twist, where stories whisper like wind through ancient trees, and every tale is a thread waiting to be sewn into your night. Tonight, we begin a journey, a quiet, magical tale meant to lull you into sleep, full of soft mystery, gentle wonder, and a heart full of hope. So take a breath, let the day melt away, close your eyes, if you'd like, and step with me into the Moonwood, where something old is stirring, and a stitcher named Bramble is about to. Remember who he truly is. This is Whispers of the Moonwood. In a land just beyond the edges of maps and morning dreams, there rests a soft and sleepy realm called Aldera. No wars have troubled its skies. No beasts have sharpened claws in its forests. Time moves slowly there, as if even the hours were reluctant to stir too quickly. Nestled at the edge of the Moonwood forest, a glimmering stretch of silverleaf trees and starlit moss, was a peculiar little home. It was shaped like a teapot, with a chimney that puffed gentle rings of lavender smoke. Its roof was thick with soft blue moss, and its windows glowed with a buttery golden light that never seemed too bright nor too dim. This was the cottage of Bramble Tiddlepot, the lantern keeper of Moonwood. Bramble was a gnome of very small size, but very large heart. His beard looked like clouds caught in cobwebs, and he wore tiny round spectacles that always slid down his nose when he was excited. His hat, a patchy pointed one with jingle bells sewn into the brim, was older than some trees, and his job, if it could be called that, was to tend the dream lanterns. Now, dream lanterns weren't ordinary lights. These were gentle, floating globes filled with dreamlight, which drifted through the forest at night, guiding thoughts and dreams gently toward the minds of those who needed them most, especially children who couldn't sleep, travelers lost in thought, or even animals curled up with restless tails. Some lanterns glowed with the hum of lullabies. Others smelled faintly of honey cakes and warm quilts. Bramble took great pride in his work. Each evening, as the last rays of sunlight yawned across the hills, he'd shuffle out in his fuzzy badger slippers, stretch his arms to the stars, and begin lighting each lantern with a soft, musical plink. He'd just finished placing the last lantern along the crooked fence, pausing to sip a bit of sleepy root tea, when one particular lantern blinked, not just a flicker from the wind or a sleepy flutter, but a pattern. 3 soft pulses, then a pause, then 3 again. Bramble blinked. Then he adjusted his spectacles and leaned closer. "Oh ho," he whispered, smiling to himself. "Looks like someone out there's having trouble dreaming tonight." The lantern pulsed again. He knew what this meant. Every so often, the forest itself would gently call to him through the dream lanterns, guiding him to a special place where a little extra dream magic was needed. It could be for a child who'd lost their favorite blanket, or a tired traveler in need of rest, or a creature who simply felt too lonely to sleep. Bramble packed a small leather pouch with dream seeds, tiny glowing pearls that shimmered with silvery light. He added 2 honey biscuits, one for him, one for a squirrel friend named Poppy, and tucked a soft wool blanket into his satchel, just in case. He picked up his walking stick, an old vine-twisted staff that brewed tea if you tapped it twice and stepped onto the moss-lined path. The forest greeted him like an old friend. The breeze carried the scent of chamomile and rain-dusted bark. Glowing mushrooms bowed as he passed, and sleepy foxes lifted their heads just enough to blink lazily in his direction before curling back into their mossy beds. "Evening, Tansy," Bramble called softly to a night owl perched on a branch. "Good dreams to you." He nodded to a family of hedgehogs already dozing beneath a curled leaf. The lantern that had blinked now floated ahead of him, bobbing gently through the trees, casting soft blue light. It guided him deeper than he usually went, past the shimmer pond, beyond the whispering glade, and into a part of the Moonwood he hadn't visited in many seasons. Eventually, the trees parted, and there it was, a meadow, tucked like a secret inside the forest. The grass was velvet smooth, dotted with white flowers that only bloomed beneath moonlight. Fireflies hovered in slow, drowsy spirals. In the center of the clearing stood a great stone statue of a sleeping dragon, its wings folded like curtains around its curled body. Its eyes were closed, its mouth slightly smiling, as though dreaming a dream it had dreamed for centuries. At the base of the statue was a stone pedestal, and upon it rested the blinking lantern. Bramble approached quietly and set down his pack. "It's been a long time, old friend," he said to the statue. "You still look just as peaceful." The dragon's name was Erwin, once known in ancient stories as the guardian of dreams. It was said that when people across the realm suffered from nightmares or sleeplessness, Erwin would silently enter their dreams and turn shadows into soft feathers, thunder into distant lullabies, and restless hearts into still waters. Legends claimed Erwin had chosen to rest in this very spot when the world became peaceful enough that no one needed guarding anymore. But sometimes, just sometimes, the forest would remember. Bramble knelt and began planting dream seeds in a gentle circle around the base of the statue. He hummed an old tune passed down by dreamkeepers before him. It was a lullaby with no words, just soft tones that felt like being rocked in a cradle made of moonlight. The seeds began to glow. Soft blue light rose from the earth and drifted toward the sky. Far away, beyond the forest, across sleepy hills, over quiet villages, a child who had been tossing and turning finally let out a long, slow yawn. Their tiny hands unclenched, the anxious hum in their hearts stilled, and with a sleepy sigh, they drifted into a deep and gentle slumber. Back in the meadow, Bramble smiled. He felt it, like a warm ripple through the lanterns that surrounded the world. Somewhere someone was resting at last. He laid his blanket across the soft grass beside the statue. The lantern above the pedestal gave one last pulse, then dimmed into a soft glow. Bramble took off his slippers, pulled his nightcap over his eyes, and leaned back against the dragon's curled tail. "Good night, Erwin," he murmured. "Good night, Moonwood. Good night, world." The forest listened. The fireflies danced slower. The stars overhead blinked once, then let everything sleep. The stars over the Moonwood had just begun to dip westward when a quiet ripple stirred the forest's edge. It wasn't a breeze, nor the hoot of an owl, or the rustle of deer through the brush. It was older than that, deeper, a sound like someone humming beneath the surface of a stream. Not loud, just felt, like music remembered from a dream. Bramble Tiddlepot stirred under his blanket. He blinked awake slowly as the soft, flickering glow of the dream lantern beside Erwin's statue dimmed to a cozy blue. His back popped softly as he sat up, brushing sleep from his eyes and shaking a few flower petals out of his beard. "Well now," he mumbled, stretching. "What have we here?" The sound was calling, not in words, but in feeling, like a sigh on the wind that made your eyes heavier, your heart softer. And it came, Bramble realized, from the direction of the Silverweave River. He tucked the dream lantern into his satchel, refolded his blanket, and gave Erwin's tail a pat. "Back soon," he said. "Just going to check on an old friend." The path to the river was soft and misty. Moon moss glowed under his feet, and the branches above swayed in slow time with his steps. Along the way, Bramble greeted the forest as one might greet neighbors, a nod to the moss tortoise by the old stump, a soft whistle to the snoring willows, and a biscuit left for Poppy, who would no doubt find it by morning. When Bramble reached the banks of the Silverweave, the moonlight painted the water in threads of silver and pale gold. The river didn't rush, nor babble, it murmured. It whispered like old pages turning, and there, rising gently from the water, was a shimmer, not quite a person, not quite light, a figure shaped of glistening mist and flowing water, like moonbeams caught in a fountain. Bramble smiled, eyes warm with recognition. "Evening, dear spirit," he said, doffing his nightcap. "Did the forest call you too?" The river spirit nodded slowly. Its voice was like the sound of water on smooth stones. "There is a little one," it said, "a child by the shore, far from here in the village of Elwyn. She weeps in her sleep. Her dreams are adrift." Bramble's heart tugged gently. "Poor dear," he murmured. "Let's see what we can do." He reached into his pouch and pulled out 3 dream seeds. But these weren't like the others. These shimmered like dewdrops and gave off a soft tone when held. "I can't quite reach her from here," the river spirit whispered. "She sleeps behind stone walls, beneath a rooftop of sorrow." Bramble tapped his walking stick twice. With a soft psst, the top popped open and released a curl of steam that smelled of peppermint and vanilla. He poured 2 cups of tea, one for himself, and one he placed on a lily pad that floated over to the spirit, who bowed in thanks. "Then we'll bring the dream to her," Bramble said, gently, carefully. He stood at the riverbank, dream seeds in one hand, the lantern in the other. He hummed an ancient tune that the river itself remembered. The water glowed brighter, and the lantern shimmered as it hovered over the river's surface. Slowly, it drifted forward, catching the dream seed's light and absorbing it like sunlight through glass. The river spirit raised its arms, and the lantern began to spin. It lifted higher, slow and steady, trailing silvery threads behind it, like floating ribbon. The mist above the water caught the threads and twisted them into a sail, a drifting dreamboat stitched from light and memory. It rose into the sky, gliding westward, across the hills, over farms and forests, toward the little village of Aelwyn. There, in a modest house with ivy-covered stone and creaky shutters, a girl named Mira lay in bed, clutching a faded blanket. Her mother had been sick for many days, and the girl's dreams had become tangled, full of worry and long shadows. But tonight, a warm light touched her window. The dreamboat passed over her rooftop like a soft sigh. The light spilled into her room, and a gentle melody settled around her heart. She sighed in her sleep, the tightness in her chest loosening, and for the first time in many nights, she dreamed of floating, of light, of dragon wings curled around, and meadows, of stars that sang lullabies and rivers that smiled. Back in the Moonwood, Bramble and the spirit watched the glow in the distance. "It reached her," the spirit whispered. Bramble nodded. "A bit of sleep magic goes a long way." They sat in companionable silence. The river murmured its quiet thanks. The tea, now half drunk, grew pleasantly cool. Before leaving, Bramble reached down and tucked one final dream seed into a hollow, in the riverbank. "For the next dreamer," he whispered. And as he turned to go, fireflies rose from the water like tiny lanterns, dancing around him all the way back to the path. The Moonwood was quiet once more. Erwin still slept, and somewhere, far away, a girl smiled in her dreams, not because she saw the magic, but because she felt it. The morning in Moonwood never rushed in. It tiptoed. Soft light drifted through silver leaves like cream poured over parchment, and the mist hung lazily among the branches, unwilling to rise before it absolutely had to. Bramble Tiddlepot had returned to his cozy, teapot-shaped cottage, slippers damp with dew, heart content after helping the river spirit guide a lonely dream. He was halfway through a warm slice of cinnamon toast and a cup of berry root tea when he noticed something peculiar. Silence. Not the gentle, sleepy hush of a forest waking slowly, but something missing. Bramble set his cup down and turned his head. He waited, listened. "No hum," he whispered. Every morning since before he could remember, a soft humming sound could be heard drifting from the hills to the south, just at the edge of Moonwood. It was never loud, never constant, just a warm, low tone that would rise and fall, like the sound of someone thinking in music. The hill was called Hallowbrow, named after the ancient giant who was said to have once laid down to rest there and simply never woke again. Not out of sorrow or spell, but from deep, peaceful contentment. Locals said the hill still breathed, and its hum was its dream song. A sound that helped the creatures of the valley sleep deeply and without fear. But this morning, Hallowbrow was quiet. Bramble wiped his hands, grabbed his satchel, and without even putting on his badger slippers, stepped outside and tapped his walking stick. Let's go see what's troubling the old hill. The path to Hallowbrow was long but gentle, winding past whispering reeds, sleepy badger dens, and old tree stumps where the moss grew in the shape of hearts. Bramble took his time, stopping once to pick a sprig of moonmint for tea, and again to help a baby turtle find its way back to a puddle. By the time he reached the base of Hallowbrow, the sun had barely risen, and the hill still shimmered with the morning's mist. The grass here was soft and thick, and wildflowers of blue, white, and lavender dotted the slope like stardust. Bramble placed a hand on the ground and closed his eyes. He waited. Still nothing. No hum, no pulse, no song. "It's as if you've gone quiet inside, dear hill," he murmured. Just then, a rustling sound caught his ear. Bramble turned, careful not to startle whatever it was. From behind a patch of tall golden grass emerged a creature about the size of a loaf of bread. It was plump, with stubby paws, long ears, and eyes that blinked in slow concern. "Oh, hello there," Bramble said, kneeling. "You look like a whisperbun. Haven't seen your kind in years." The whisperbun, true to its name, made only the softest woof-woof sound as it pawed at the ground. "You feel it too, don't you?" Bramble said. "The hill's gone quiet." The whisperbun turned and bounced a few paces up the hill, then looked back as if beckoning. "Well," said Bramble, brushing off his knees, "I suppose we're going up." The journey up Hallowbrow was slow, but not tiring. It was the sort of slope that welcomed your steps, each one cushioned by years of soft moss and buried dreams. Along the way, Bramble noticed other small forest creatures, a fox, a pair of drowsy squirrels, even a lantern moth or two, all lingering silently near the summit, eyes lifted as if waiting. At the very top, nestled in a shallow dip, was a ring of standing stones. Not grand or tall, but ancient and quiet. In the center was a single stone bowl filled with still water. Bramble peered in. He saw not his reflection, but a scene. A child, curled in a small bed made of reeds and driftwood, in a hut far from Moonwood. Her face was scrunched in sleep, troubled, turning from side to side. A soft blue glow hovered above her forehead, blinking faintly. A dream lantern, unable to find its rhythm. "This is what silenced you," Bramble whispered to the hill. "You're holding your breath." The hill, in its ancient kindness, had sensed this child's unrest and paused its hum, not out of fear, but to listen more carefully. But without its hum, the valley's dreams were becoming restless too. Bramble knelt before the stone bowl. He hummed, softly at first, barely a breath, then fuller, deeper, like the beginning of a song remembered from long ago. The animals around him stilled. The whisperbun sat very still. Even the wind seemed to hush. The tune wasn't for the child directly. It was for the hill, to remind it that its hum was the comfort, not the cause. That its song had always carried dreams safely, like a leaf on a gentle river. The stone bowl shimmered. The image inside softened. The child exhaled. Her brow eased, and far below, in the deepest root of the hill, the hum returned. Slow, low, warm. It filled the valley like morning fog, wrapping every branch, every creature, every sleepy corner in soundless comfort. Bramble smiled. The whisperbun hopped in happy little circles. The hill had remembered its song. That night, back in his teapot cottage, Bramble tucked himself into his patchwork bed. The fireflies outside blinked in rhythm with the humming hill. As his eyes closed and his breathing slowed, the last thought to drift through his mind was a whisper from the hill itself. "Sleep gently, little lantern keeper. We are all dreaming now." The stars above Moonwood shone brighter than usual that night, as if the sky itself was holding its breath in wonder. Down below, the gentle hum of Hallowbrow echoed through the forest, weaving through trees and crickets and the quiet rustling of windswept leaves. In his cottage shaped like a teapot, Bramble Tiddlepot stirred from a restful nap. His lantern had begun to glow a soft amber at the edges, not the usual warm gold of a gentle dream, but a deeper hue, earthy, old. He rubbed his eyes and squinted at the flame inside the glass. "A memory," he whispered, "but one that hasn't been touched in a very long time." He stood, slipping on his moss slippers and pulling his patchy cloak over his shoulders. With his satchel in one hand and lantern in the other, he stepped outside. The forest greeted him like an old friend. Toadstools tipped their caps. A crow dozing on a branch gave a sleepy blink. Even the clouds had parted slightly, letting moonlight dust the path that wound up to an old, forgotten part of the woods, one few ever visited anymore. It was said that past the creak of echoes, and beyond the bridge that listens, there stood a house, or what remained of one, a house with no doors, no roof, and only half a staircase. But the attic still stood, because the attic wasn't just made of beams and nails, it was made of memories. The walk took Bramble through sleeping groves, around starlit ponds, and over roots shaped like curled-up animals. The lantern pulsed quietly, in his hand, guiding him like a heartbeat toward the half-standing home. When he arrived, he paused at the crooked gate. "Still standing," he murmured with a smile. "You old dream keeper." Before him stood a crumbling stone cottage, the top floors long faded away, except for a spire-like attic room, hovering just above the ruin, as if gravity had long since given up trying to hold it down. 4 rickety steps led nowhere. Vines crept along the broken walls, but above, the attic window glowed faintly from within. Bramble tapped his walking stick 3 times. The dream lantern flared, and the air around the broken house shimmered like heat on summer stone. The attic remembered him. With a gentle sigh, the vines peeled away, revealing a narrow spiral of stairs rising toward the hovering attic. Bramble stepped up, each footfall soft and silent. Inside, the attic was larger than it should have been. Shelves curved along the walls, filled with boxes wrapped in twine and cobwebs. Bottles of stardust glimmered between jars labeled "First Laugh," "Almost Kiss," and "Forgotten Birthday Cake." In the center of the room sat a chair, and in the chair, a shape. Not quite a person, not quite a shadow. It shifted as Bramble entered, the way an old song stirs when you hum it under your breath. The figure looked up, its eyes made of distant candlelight. "You've come," it whispered. "I wasn't sure if anyone would." "I follow the lantern," Bramble said kindly, "and it led me to you." The shadow figure sighed. "I am the keeper of all the dreams no one wants anymore, the ones children outgrew, the ones adults buried. I hold them all, but it's been so long since anyone remembered me. I fear I've begun to forget them too." Bramble stepped forward and opened his satchel. From within, he withdrew a simple object, a small wooden spinning top, its colors faded but still visible beneath time's dust. "This," he said gently, "was mine. I used to spin it beside the fire while my grandfather told stories. I hadn't thought of it in decades, until the lantern flickered tonight." He placed the top on the attic floor. The shadow reached out with tendrils of dusk, brushing it. The top began to spin, slowly, then faster, and as it did, light bled into the room. Books fluttered open, jars pulsed softly. A soft tune, a lullaby, from no one's lips, filled the air like drifting petals. "I remember now," whispered the shadow. "The attic is not forgotten, only waiting." Bramble walked to the shelves. He touched boxes and jars, whispering soft names, titles, tiny memories. The dream of flying with silver wings. The day someone first saw snow. The smell of old wood and warm cinnamon. Each one flickered brighter. Each one awoke. And as they stirred, the attic itself began to glow. Walls becoming less ruin, more memory. The shadow sat upright now, eyes golden and calm. You've given them. Voice again, it said. Will you stay a while? Bramble smiled. Only until you fall asleep. He lit a soft blue flame in the lantern, set it beside the chair, and curled up in the corner, humming a tune he'd learned as a child, about forests that never forgot and stars that kept secrets. The attic sighed, deep and low. The shadow rested its head, and as the room dimmed back to candlelight, Bramble whispered, "Even forgotten dreams deserve to sleep peacefully." It had been several quiet nights since Bramble Tiddlepot visited the attic of forgotten dreams. The Moonwood was at ease now. Its trees swayed with restful rhythm, the hill hummed low and soft, and even the whisperbuns napped in tangled piles of moss and clover. But one evening, as Bramble sat sipping nettle tea and darning the corner of a quilt shaped like a sleepy bear, a gentle knock echoed on the window. Tap, tap, tap. Bramble looked up. No one stood outside, no creature peered in. But above the window, nestled in the inky sky, a single star shimmered blue, not white, not golden, blue and flickering, like a candle about to go out. Bramble tilted his head and squinted. "No. Name," he whispered. All stars had names, even the small ones. Some were given names by stargazers, some by children's dreams, and others by the dreams of trees or birds, or even the silence between lullabies. Names gave stars their shape, their purpose. But this one had been forgotten, and a star without a name, that was like a dream without a place to go. Bramble stood. He fetched his satchel, his lantern, and an acorn cap full of honey biscuits. With a steady breath, he tapped his walking stick once and whispered, "Skyward." The lantern flared, and so did the stars above. They swirled softly, the sky bending into a staircase of shimmering light. Bramble stepped onto the first glow, and the next, and the next, rising into the night like a leaf floating upward on a wind you couldn't see. He passed by constellations curled like sleeping cats, moons dozing in cradles of silver fog, and great wings of stardust shaped like owls. The sky welcomed him quietly. No rush, no sound, just a peaceful, glowing hush. At last, he reached the little blue star. It sat alone, just above the curve of the moon. It didn't burn or sparkle, just blinked gently, as if unsure of its place. "Hello there," Bramble said, landing lightly beside it. The star flickered in reply. "Just once. You've lost your name, haven't you?" Another flicker. Softer this time. Bramble took a biscuit from his pouch and broke it in half, placing one beside the star. The biscuit floated gently in place, dusted in honey glow. "I lost names too," he said, "but we can find a new one if you'd like." The star pulsed, a little stronger. Bramble knelt beside it, lantern glowing low. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a bundle of ribbons, all different colors, lengths, and materials. Each was a dream once whispered under a blanket, or sung by a parent who thought no one else could hear. He offered the first ribbon, silver and soft. This one was dreamt by a boy who wanted to dance on clouds. The star hummed. It warmed slightly. He offered the next, pale pink and stitched with tiny stars. A girl who wished to talk with flowers. The star shimmered brighter. One by one, Bramble laid out dreams, some from children, some from old souls. A ribbon from a wishing well. A bow from a fox who once dreamed of being a poet. A thread from the inside of a dragon's heart. As the dreams unfurled, the star began to grow. Not in size, but in presence. It began to shine. Not blinding, not loud, warm, familiar, like something remembered. Bramble leaned in, smiling gently. There, you are. You've always been here. Just needed someone to listen. He reached into his satchel one last time and pulled out a single tag. Blank parchment, trimmed with twilight blue ink. He held it up to the star. I can write your name. Now if you're ready. The star glowed deep gold. And then, softly, a name filled Bramble's mind. Not in words exactly, more in feeling. It meant comfort. It meant safe return. It meant the quiet right before sleep. Bramble smiled and wrote the name on the tag. He tied it gently to the star, and the star sang. A sound like wind through feathers, like lullabies hummed by the moon. Not loud, not even something you could remember afterward, but perfect in the moment. Then it floated upward, joining its kin in the sky. No longer alone, no longer nameless. Back in his teapot cottage, Bramble curled beneath the bear quilt once more. The lantern beside him glowed blue for a few moments longer, then shifted to a soft gold as he drifted off to sleep. Outside, one star blinked brightly, just once, and far below, across Moonwood and beyond, children, animals, and dreamers, everywhere sighed in their sleep, comforted by a star they didn't know they'd always known. The morning in Moonwood began with a flutter, not birdsong, not wind, but butterflies. Hundreds of them, not ordinary ones either. These were shimmering and slow, each one shaped like a scale of crystal. They drifted from the east, passing over, tree branches and sleepy critters, wings catching sunlight in silent patterns. Bramble Tiddlepot stood on the edge of the river Wisp, blinking up at the glittering clouds of them. He watched as one landed on the tip of his lantern, resting briefly, before dissolving into a puff of warm fog. "That's not butterflies," Bramble murmured. "That's a dream." He bent down and dipped his fingers into the water. The river pulsed softly, and the current swirled with glimmers of firelight and glow embers, drifting like stars caught underwater. All around the forest, strange things were happening. Trees exhaled sparks instead of leaves. The sky swam with drifting islands of moss. Small animals giggled in their sleep and floated a few inches off the ground. Moonwood wasn't in danger, not exactly, but it had become someone else's dream. Bramble narrowed his eyes and looked to the eastern cliffs, where fog hugged the slopes and the air shimmered like heat. "She's dreaming again," he whispered, "and her dreams are leaking." Far beneath those cliffs, tucked deep in a cave carved from volcanic glass, lay a dragon. Not a fearsome one. Not snarling or greedy. She was ancient, peaceful. Her scales shimmered like dusk on water, and her wings were folded gently beneath her like a blanket. Her name was Velomira, the sleeper of the hollow. She hadn't woken in 100 years, nor had she meant to stir now. But dragons, even sleeping ones, dream loud, and sometimes the world listens too closely. Bramble packed 2 sprigs of mint leaf, a vial of soft sand for calming spells, and a locket that hummed lullabies when opened. With his lantern glowing faint lavender, the color of wandering dreams, he followed the butterflies through the forest, over fallen logs and misted pools, all the way to the slumbering hollow. At the edge of the cave, time felt slower. The mist moved sideways. The stones pulsed faintly beneath Bramble's feet, as if breathing in sync with something vast and asleep below. He stepped quietly. Inside, the cave walls shimmered. Memories of fire flickered gently in the obsidian. Old battles, old kindnesses, old nights full of stars. And there, curled like the roots of a mountain, lay Velomira. Her eyes were closed. Her tail wrapped around a bed of moss, and her breathing rose and fell like a tide. Bramble approached slowly, carefully setting the lantern at her side. "Hello again, Mira," he said softly. It's been a while. The dragon twitched, not in fear, but in unease. A sigh escaped her snout, and all around them, the cave began to ripple, not with sound, but story. Suddenly, Bramble was standing in a world that wasn't his. He floated, above an endless library, where the books drifted on clouds and the words whispered themselves aloud. He stepped through a field of flame roses, each one warm to the touch, petals made of folded memories. He stood before a tower made of scales, reaching far into the stars. Velomira's dream, but it was unfinished, restless, a dream without anchor. She's lost in it, Bramble murmured, reaching for the locket in his satchel. She's dreaming too deeply. He opened the locket. A soft tune drifted out. Just 4 notes, repeated gently. The lullaby his grandmother once hummed while stirring soup, while folding laundry, while helping him fall asleep after bad dreams. The tower of scales trembled. From the sky above, a shape descended, not fully formed, but wishing to be, the dream self of Velomira. She looked like a great bird, then a dragon, then a flame. She shimmered with uncertainty. I don't know what I'm supposed to be, the dream dragon said softly. You're dreaming too loud, Bramble said kindly. And the forest is trying to dream with you, but they don't know the words to your song. I forgot how to sleep alone, she whispered. You're not alone, Bramble said. He reached up and touched her snout, a small gesture in a vast world, and from his lantern came a second tune. Not a lullaby, a duet. The forest began to hum, the moss, the mist, even the sky, not loud, not demanding, just enough to remind her that she was being heard. The dragon exhaled. The field of flame roses softened to ember. The tower of scales curled inward into a spiral, not falling, just folding. The clouds above settled, and the books in the air slowly closed. And then the world dimmed. The dream let go. Bramble stood once more in the quiet cave. Velomira remained asleep, but this time peacefully, not restless, not leaking fire butterflies into the waking world. Her breathing steadied, her tail curled tighter, and beneath her closed eyes, a small glimmer of a smile flickered. Bramble gave a slow bow. I'll check in again soon, he said. That night, back in the teapot-shaped cottage, Bramble watched the stars. No butterflies, no flying teacups, just calm. And somewhere far away, deep beneath the cliffs, a dragon dreamed a dream only for herself, and it was good. Moonwood had always had a song. You couldn't quite hum it, and you couldn't quite find where it came from, but it was always there, low and distant, like the hush of wind through tall reeds, or the hum of moonlight stroking the tops of trees. That night, Bramble Tiddlepot noticed something missing, not broken, not wrong, just absent. He stood at the edge of his garden, lantern in hand, and listened. No tune. The silence wasn't cold or harsh, it was soft, like the world was waiting for something to begin, and whatever it was hadn't arrived. Not yet. Bramble knew what it was. The night singer, he whispered. She wasn't seen often, only in glimpses. A shadow perched on the highest branch, a glimmer of silver eyes near the crescent moon. Some said she had feathers, others fur. Still others claimed she was made entirely of mist. But everyone agreed on one thing. Her voice brought sleep. Not just sleep, but the kind that settled you so deep and soft. You'd wake in the morning unsure if you had ever moved at all, and now, her voice was gone. Bramble followed the hush into the woods. No footsteps, no birds. Just his lantern, pulsing a gentle violet, as if listening alongside him. He crossed the mirror-root grove, where puddles shimmered like silver, reflecting not what was, but what had been. He walked beneath the dream drift arch, where moss hummed when touched. He moved through stillness so complete it felt like time itself had tucked in for the night. Then, near a hollow carved into a hill of soft bark, he saw her, curled in the roots of an old sleeping tree. The night singer sat with her head bowed. Her body shimmered with dust colors. Not quite dark, not quite light. Her wings, if they were wings, folded like silence around her. Bramble approached quietly and placed his lantern down beside her. "I heard the quiet," he said softly. "It led me here." The night singer looked up. Her eyes were luminous, like candlelight reflected in still water. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Instead, she projected a thought, not with words, but feeling. "I had a dream, and when I woke, my voice was still inside it." Bramble nodded. He sat beside her, pulling a velvet pouch from his satchel. "I once lost a laugh the same way," he said gently. "Tucked it inside a dream so deep, it took me years to find." He opened the pouch. Inside was a pale thread, glowing faintly blue, spun from the dream of a spider who once tried to weave music into her web. He handed it to the night singer. "This will help us follow the silence backward." They sat still, perfectly still, and slowly, the silence became a door. Not one you could see, but one you could pass through if you were still enough, gentle enough. Bramble closed his eyes. The night singer did too, and together they stepped into the dream she had not finished. Inside, they stood in a meadow made entirely of hush. The grass did not rustle. The stars above made no sound. Even the wind moved like breath between pages of a closed book. At the center of the meadow stood a tree made of chimes, silver and smoky, unmoving. Beneath it sat a nest, and in the nest, a feather. No bird, no egg, just a single shimmering feather, softly pulsing. "That's it," Bramble whispered. "That's your voice." The night singer stepped forward, but the feather floated upward, just out of reach, not flying away, waiting. "I think it wants something first," Bramble said. "A reason to return." The night singer looked to the meadow, to the stillness, the hush, the quiet that had protected her voice like a cradle, and then she sang. Not with her voice, but with her memory of it. A vibration passed through the meadow, a hum made from moonlight and longing. The trees swayed. The chimes on the silver tree began to move, softly, gently, and then the feather fell, straight into her hands. Back in the real world, Bramble opened his eyes. The lantern pulsed gold beside him, and the night singer, she sang. The sound was gentle, a single note that wrapped around the trees and stones and stars, winding through branches and burrows, down into dreams and up into clouds. A note that said, "It's time now. Rest. You are safe." Bramble smiled, tears gently gathering in his old eyes. "That's more than a lullaby," he whispered. "That's a promise." He walked home slowly that night. No rush. For all around him, Moonwood exhaled. The trees leaned in, the moss curled close, and the hush that returned wasn't empty. It was full of peace, and far off, high in the trees, the night singer watched, her voice once more part of the night. There are places in Moonwood where memory sleeps, not lost, not erased, just resting, like a folded scarf in a drawer you haven't opened in years, or the taste of a berry you haven't eaten since childhood. One such place was called the Burrow of Forgotten Names. It was never in the same spot twice. Some days, it appeared beneath a knot in a tree. Other times, behind a mirror's reflection. Once, Bramble Tiddlepot found it curled inside a pocket of thundercloud, folded neatly between. 2 raindrops. This time, it came to him as a note in a dream, a whisper, light as dust. "Come find the name you left behind." Bramble woke with his heart beating quiet and deep, like a bell under water. He rose, packed only a single biscuit, and followed the mist as it wound through the trees like old thread. No path, No footprints, just instinct and hush. The kind of hush that comes before something important, not loud or bright, but softly turning in the dark like a seed beneath soil. He found the burrow beneath an overturned log blanketed in moss. A small wooden sign stuck into the ground read, "Please remove shoes before entering." Forgotten things. So he did. Then he ducked inside. The tunnel sloped downward gently, lit by fireflies that blinked in soft, rhythmic pulses. The walls were lined with tags, scraps of paper, ribbons, stones, feathers, each one etched with a name. Some were long and proud. Elvenar the Fourth, Keeper of Star Winds. Some were small and odd. Mibsy, Toothbean, Almost Helen. And some were unfinished, torn at the end, faded, half remembered. Bramble walked carefully, nodding to each as if they might nod back. Then, near the burrow's heart, he found it. Name carved into driftwood, knotted and grey. Tiddlepot before. He blinked. He hadn't seen that name since. Ever. And yet, it was his. Somehow, a quiet figure stood nearby. Small, owl-shaped, and made entirely of dried leaves and thread. Its voice rustled when it spoke. "Left this here a long time ago," the leaf owl said. Didn't say why. Bramble knelt and touched the driftwood. The name hummed under his fingers. Not loud, not sharp, just familiar in a way that made his chest ache softly. "I was someone else, wasn't I?" he asked. The leaf owl nodded. "We all were. Before we chose who, we became. Can I remember who I was?" "You could," said the owl. "But sometimes, remembering folds the present into the past. Not wrong, just heavy." Bramble sat in stillness. The name on the wood glowed faintly, like the last light in a lantern before sleep. He thought of all the things he was now: teapot dweller, lullaby watcher, dreamwalker, friend of the night singer, lantern lighter, maker of warm biscuits. He traced the old name once more, and then he let it go. The driftwood shimmered and gently broke into a small swirl of wind and ash. Not gone, just no longer needed. The leaf owl gave a quiet nod. That name sleeps again now, but it smiled before it did. Bramble smiled too, as he rose to leave. The fireflies blinked once more, and the tunnel behind him curved back into the world above. When he stepped into the moonlight again, barefoot and at ease, the moss felt especially soft, as if the earth were grateful. That night, in the quiet of his cottage, Bramble didn't write down what he'd seen. He didn't need to. Some memories are meant to be carried only in the heart, not on paper, not in jars, not in names. He fell asleep with no dreams, just peace. And somewhere, in a burrow that no longer existed, a name rested gently, waiting. Not for him, but for no one in particular. And that was enough. It began with a note, not delivered by hand, not tied to an owl's foot or left on a windowsill. This note descended, folded like a paper crane, drifting through the air on a silver breeze, landing with a quiet shh on Bramble Tiddlepot's windowsill. He was halfway through buttering a biscuit. The paper shimmered faintly, and when he opened it, the ink glowed like frost in candlelight. 1 cup of cloudleaf tea, 1 question, midnight, above the fold. L. Bramble blinked, then chuckled. "Well," he murmured, "it's been years since I was invited to tea by the moon." The fold, as it was known in Moonwood, was not a place you walked to. It was a crease in the sky, just above the tallest of the old pines, where the air shimmered like fabric tugged too tightly. Most folk thought it was just a trick of the light, but Bramble knew better. He packed his lantern, a warm scarf, and a single pouch of cloudleaf, a rare tea that brewed only when cradled in moonlight. Then he climbed the old pines, higher than he'd gone in decades, until the stars bent downward like they were listening. And there, in the fold, was a table set for two, one teacup already steaming, and across from it, an empty chair. He sat, poured the cloud leaf, and waited. The wind held its breath. And then, she appeared, not from above or below, but from the sky itself. She unfolded like a sigh, her cloak stitched with galaxies, her eyes the color of unread stories. The moon had sent a messenger. "Bramble Tiddlepot," she said, voice soft as velvet on snow. "The one who gave up a name." He nodded. "You must be Elle." "I am," she replied. "Though some call me Lunescence. I keep the edges of sleep stitched shut. And lately, there's been a tear." Bramble's brows rose. "A tear?" She set her teacup down. It didn't clink. It glimmered. "Something is waking," she said. "Something older than dreams, and wider than sleep. And it doesn't remember kindness." That was the twist. The soft, silver-teethed twist that turned the air colder, just a little. Lunescence handed him a stone no bigger than a plum. It pulsed, slowly. "Do you remember when you walked the dream of the dragon? Or followed silence into song? These were not accidents, Bramble. You've been walking towards something." Bramble looked down at the stone. It blinked. Not light, an eye. His hand trembled. "I thought I was just helping," he whispered. "You were," said Lunescence. "But every kindness sends ripples. Every ripple leads somewhere." The sky around them stirred, and something, far off, stirred back. Lunescence stood. Take the eye. When the whispering fog reaches Moonwood, it will show you what it sees. But beware, what it shows may not be ready to be seen. She paused, then added, "Not all things that sleep deserve to wake." And just like that, she folded, back into the sky. Gone. Bramble sat in stillness for a long time. Then he finished his tea, though it had gone cool, and tucked the blinking stone into the deepest pocket of his satchel. The stars above flickered, but one, just one, winked shut. That night, Bramble didn't sleep. He sat by the lantern and waited, and somewhere in a forgotten part of the sky, something very old began to turn in its slumber. Not angry, not awake, but interested. The next morning, the wind was wrong, not dangerous, not loud, just curious. It moved in tight spirals, tugging at curtains, spinning moss in little silent circles. It traced letters in the dust that vanished when Bramble blinked, and though it carried no chill, it whispered things that made the inside of his bones feel cold. He knew what it meant. The whispering fog was coming. He touched the eye stone in his pocket. It pulsed once, slow and steady. A heartbeat, not his own. To fix what was unraveling, Bramble needed the wind threaders, ancient figures who lived high above Moonwood, in a place where the clouds slowed to listen. They didn't live in houses or trees, but in spools of breeze, always shifting, never quite there when you looked directly at them. Most folk thought they were myth, but Bramble had seen one once, when he was small and scared and had cried. So hard the wind wrapped around him to keep him from blowing away. He remembered the sound of her voice, like a thread being drawn through silk, and so, with a pouch of tea, a silver pin, and a leaf folded into a map, Bramble climbed. He climbed, past birdsong, past cloud lines, past breath itself, until each step felt like memory instead of motion. And there, floating in the hush, was a loom made of air. The wind threaders were there, 3 of them. One spun, one measured, and one stitched, using threads of weather, so fine they shimmered in and out of existence. They didn't speak at first, but when Bramble placed the blinking eye stone on a flat gust of wind, the stitcher looked up and frowned. "This eye shouldn't be open," she said. "I didn't open it," Bramble replied. The measurer gently ran her fingers through the air, and a ribbon of mist twisted upward like smoke, forming a long, unraveling seam in the sky. The tear has reached the threshold of listening, she whispered. It is starting to understand, the spinner hissed. Then it's too late. No, Bramble said softly. It's listening. That doesn't mean it understands us yet. There's still time to stitch the sky closed before it mistakes our dreaming for an invitation. The threaders considered. Then, the stitcher held out a needle made of moonlight and thorn. You must carry this, she said. Find the first loose thread. The rest cannot be mended until it is tied. Where do I find it? Bramble asked. The spinner spoke. It will not be found by looking, only by remembering what you've forgotten to fear. The wind around them trembled like a harp string just plucked, and far off, a howl echoed through the sky. It was low, long, and curious, not a predator's howl, a seeker's. Bramble accepted the needle. It was light, but the moment he took it, the wind stopped, whispering in words, and started murmuring memories instead. Voices he hadn't heard in decades, lullabies sung to him long ago, a name he hadn't chosen. He blinked, heart thudding. Is the thread inside me? The stitcher did not answer, but the measurer gave a slow, sad nod. When Bramble descended, the sky behind him didn't quite close. A tiny seam remained, only a hair's width. But from the other side, something blinked back. Not a threat, not yet, but a question. That night, Bramble sat in his chair, lantern glowing pale. He held the needle in one hand, and in the other, the stone eye. It blinked once, and this time he saw something through it, a vast plane made of mirrors, a shape moving without reflection, and a voice, his own, whispering something he hadn't said yet. You are the thread, Bramble, and you are already unraveling. The night grew quiet, too quiet. Even the rain, soft and sleepy, seemed to pause when it reached the roof of Bramble Tiddlepot's cottage, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He sat by his lantern, moonthorn needle in one hand, the stone eye in the other, and it blinked again. But this time, it didn't show a place. It showed a path, a ribbon of silver mist that wound through the woods like smoke from a forgotten campfire, tugging gently at Bramble's breath, at the back of his thoughts, like a song he couldn't quite hum. So he followed it. The mist thickened as he walked, not in a frightening way. No, this was memory mist. It didn't cling to your clothes or chill your skin. It wrapped around your thoughts, softening them, blurring edges, loosening the threads that held things in place. Every step felt like a step backward into old slippers, old laughter, old selves. He passed a tree with his initials carved into it, initials he hadn't used in decades. He passed a hollow stump filled with acorns and candle wax, from a time when he tried and failed to make his own light. He passed, finally, a quiet clearing, and in that clearing stood, leering, himself. But not now. Bramble. Not quite. This version of him wore a brighter vest. His eyes were wide with unspent wonder. His shoes were muddy, and his hands clutched a satchel too full with maps, snacks, and wild ideas. The version of himself from long ago. The one before the teapot, before the peace, before the letting go. The one who still wanted answers. You came back, the young Bramble said, smiling. I didn't know I'd left, the old Bramble replied. You did, the young one said, when you gave up our name, when you stopped asking what was beyond the hills. Bramble felt the needle in his pocket grow warm. I had to, he said gently, to sleep, to rest. But I didn't want to rest, said young Bramble. You left me behind in this loop of almost remembering. I've been dreaming and... He broke off, looked down. I think I'm fading, and Bramble saw it. The mist that made up his younger self was unweaving, one thread at a time, slowly, quietly. He understood. This was the first loose thread, not a place, not a monster, a memory, a version of himself he had forgotten to fear. Bramble stepped forward. He held the moonthorn needle in one hand and reached out with the other. Young Bramble blinked. "You're going to stitch me back in?" "No," Bramble whispered. "I'm going to stitch you free." He threaded the needle with a strand of moonlight, soft as breath, and sewed a small loop into the air between them. "I'm not here to trap you in me again," he said. "I'm here to say, I see you, I remember you, and it's okay to stop wandering." Then he did something he hadn't done in many years. He hugged himself, and the younger Bramble smiled through his tears and whispered, "Thank you." Then he faded, not into nothing, but into the thread itself, a clean stitch, a mended seam, and overhead, the sky let out a long, slow sigh. The mist cleared. The stone eye blinked once more. This time, it showed no vision, just stillness, a waiting. That night, Bramble sat quietly on the cottage porch, the needle beside him, and in the sky above, the hairline seam that had blinked open was smaller now, not sealed, but healing. For now. Bramble had just settled into his reading chair, blanket over his knees, steam rising gently from a mug of mossflower tea, when the lantern flickered, not out, not in, just sideways, like a breath drawn in a direction the room didn't allow. He felt it more than saw it, a ripple across the veil of night. And then, in the soft hush between sips and sighs, came a knock at the door. Not a proper knock, not one of rhythm or pattern, just 3 taps, like a question, unsure of itself. He opened the door, and standing there, small, shivering, and far too young to be so deep in Moonwood, was a child. She wore a nightdress stitched with stars. One of her slippers was missing. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with wonder, the kind that sometimes arrives before fear knows it should catch up. "I don't think I belong here," she said softly. "You don't," said Bramble gently, stepping aside. "But I'm glad you came." She sat on the edge of his woven chair, feet dangling, while Bramble fixed her a cup of dreamroot broth and added just a sliver of whisper honey. The lantern's glow seemed to soften around her, and the stone eye, sitting quietly on the shelf, blinked twice, as if surprised. "Where were you trying to go?" Bramble asked. She looked at her drink. "I was having a dream, with flying sheep and a river made of music. But then," she hesitated. "Then I saw a door, in the sky, and someone behind it said my name." Bramble's hands paused. "And what is your name, little one?" "I don't know anymore," she whispered. "But I think I used to." And that's when Bramble understood. This wasn't just a child. She was a dreamer, and she'd stumbled into the fold between dreams, where the veil thinned and the seams of sleep grew curious and porous. He reached for the eye stone. When he held it toward her, it blinked once, and showed something new. Not a monster, not a sky, but a nursery window. On the other side, a woman sobbed quietly into her hands. "She's still sleeping," said a gentle voice in the dream. "We don't know why she won't wake." Bramble turned to the girl. "I think you've wandered very far, little dreamer, but it's not your fault. There's something opening the doors between sleep and waking." She nodded. "I followed the voice because it sounded kind," she said. "But then it started to sound like me." Outside, the wind stirred, not violently, but like someone flipping the pages of a book, and something distant let out a low hum, a sound made of questions. Bramble stood. "We need to close your door before something else steps through it." He took the moonthorn needle, wound a single strand of candlelight around its tip, and began to stitch. Not the air this time, but the echo behind her. The half-open thread of thought that linked her to the wrong side of dreaming. As he stitched, the air grew warm. The stars in her nightdress twinkled gently, and her eyes slowly closed. Not from exhaustion, but from returning. When she vanished, it wasn't dramatic. she simply blinked away, like a thought remembered. And on the other side of the eye stone, the nursery window faded. The woman inside gasped, reached down, and smiled. Bramble sat back down, finished his tea, and for the first time in days, he exhaled. A small smile touched the corners of his lips, but it didn't last, because the stone eye blinked once more. And this time, it showed something new. A door, the same one the child had spoken of. But now it stood wide open, and from inside came a sound Bramble had hoped never to hear again. A voice that spoke not in words, but in memories that hadn't happened yet. I dreamed of you too, Bramble, and I'm almost through. The sky was still. The lantern light didn't flicker. The stone eye refused to blink, and yet Bramble felt it. The pull, like a thread tied to the center of his chest, tugging softly, insistently, towards something that had been waiting too long. He should have ignored it. He should have closed the shutters, snuffed the candle, and brewed a forgetting tea. But he didn't. Instead, Bramble reached for the needle and walked into the dark. Moonwood bent around him, not in a sinister way, but in a knowing way. Like the trees had been expecting this moment, like the stones had rehearsed their positions, like the wind knew its cue. He passed the hollow stump again, the one filled with candle wax and old acorns, except now it was empty. No, not empty. Inside it, a note, folded neatly, sealed with a wax mark. Bramble hadn't seen in over 50 years. A crest, a lantern, with an eye inside, his family's old sigil. But no one should have remembered that, not even Moonwood. He opened the note. It wasn't written in ink. It was written in echo, a single line that pulsed with familiarity he couldn't place. You left, but we didn't forget. Come home. And below that, an address. But it wasn't in any village, nor under any star Bramble knew. The address simply read, House between the second and the never. Memory line 3. Just past the part you're trying not to remember. He should have turned around. Instead, he walked forward. And with each step, the forest changed. Not dramatically, but subtly. Trees he'd never seen before, but somehow knew the names of. A stream that hummed a lullaby he hadn't heard since he was rocked to sleep as a baby. Stones placed like chess pieces. The game he used to play with his brother before the accident. He was walking not through woods anymore, but through personal history, and not his alone. He reached a gate. It wasn't made of wood or stone, but of threaded moments, silken strands stitched with echoes, a laugh from a birthday he couldn't recall, a cry from a night he'd never lived, a whisper in a voice that sounded like his, but older, sadder. Beyond the gate stood a cottage, not unlike his own, but wrong. In the windows, faces flickered, not ghosts, but possible versions of himself. One sat alone, wrapped in silence. One knelt by a grave. One danced in a lantern-lit room with no music. All of them turned, slowly, to look at him, and smiled. A voice drifted from behind the door. You're almost whole now, Bramble. And when you step inside, you'll remember who we really are. He raised the needle, but it didn't glow, didn't pulse, because there was nothing here to stitch yet. No tear, no wound, just an invitation. He stepped forward. The door opened on its own. Inside wasn't a room. It was a hallway of doors, each with a title. The one who stayed. The one who fled. The one who broke the sky. The one still dreaming. He passed each one, heart beating like a slow drum, until he found one unmarked. He touched it, and heard his own voice from the other side say, "This is the version of you that let the dream live too long." The door opened slowly. It didn't creak, didn't groan. It sighed, like a long-held breath being released. Beyond it was a quiet room, small, dustless, softly lit by the kind of lantern that doesn't cast shadows. Bramble stepped inside. There was no sound, no movement, just a single chair facing a window, and someone in it. Someone who looked exactly like him. Older, perhaps, worn around the edges, but peaceful, unnaturally so. This Bramble didn't flinch when he entered, didn't turn around. He just spoke. "Took you long enough." His voice was deeper, still gentle, still familiar, but it had the kind of weight that comes from never asking questions anymore. "I'm the one who stayed asleep," he said. "The version of you who stopped looking, stopped mending, stopped wondering." Bramble stepped closer. "Why?" The dreaming Bramble smiled, but didn't turn. "Because the world hurts, and dreams don't." A long silence followed. "Do you know what it's like," he continued, "to build a perfect world in your head and actually stay there, to sit in the memory of your favorite story and never wake up to see it spoiled?" He pointed to the window, and Bramble looked. Outside was everything he ever wanted. The Moonwood in full bloom, his brother alive, chasing, fireflies through the dusk, laughter echoing from a cottage where all the lights were always on, a world without ache or loss or things left unsaid, and in the distance, no seam in the sky, no blinking eye, no unraveling, just peace. "You could stay," said dreaming Bramble softly. "If you want. You've earned it." Bramble said nothing. His hand rested on the moonthorn needle in his pocket, cool against his palm. "Don't you ever get tired?" the dream asked. Bramble looked around the room, then down at his hands. "Yes," he said. "All the time." He took a deep breath. "But I don't trust peace I didn't earn." And with that, he pulled the needle out and stitched the dream shut. It was like tearing open a whisper. The fabric of the dream split down the middle, and light poured in, not warm, not golden, but true. The dream brambles vanished first, then the cottage, then the road, the laughter, the fireflies, all of it gone, until he was standing once more in the forest clearing beneath a sky that blinked. Once, slowly, as if surprised he'd come back, he collapsed to his knees, exhausted. The moonthorn needle fell beside him in the moss, and for the first time since it had all begun, the eye in the sky didn't blink. It closed, not sealed, but resting. That night, Bramble sat on the edge of his porch with a blanket and a slice of dewberry pie. Not because he'd saved the world, but because he'd chosen it, again. And that mattered. But far above, beyond the now closed seam in the sky, a ripple moved. Not a tear, but a question. And somewhere, something answered. One more stitch to go. Moonwood slept. The trees were still. The brooks hummed soft lullabies, and even the night creatures spoke in hushes. But Bramble Tiddlepot couldn't sleep. He sat in his rocking chair, one hand resting on the moonthorn needle, the other over his heart. There was a sound inside him. Not a voice, not a word. A thread straining quietly, not pulling apart, but waiting to be pulled through. He'd mended the sky, he'd closed the gate, he'd stitched the dream, but something still itched beneath the piece, like a promise he forgot to keep. A memory he never fully faced. He didn't know what it was, but he could feel where it was, inside, deeper than breath, older than thought, the last seam. He lit a single candle, closed his eyes, and whispered the words he hadn't said since he first picked up the needle. May the stitch be clean. May the thread remember. May the mend make me whole. Then he took the needle and placed it over his chest, just above the heart, where the first dreams live, where the last ones hide. And with steady hands, he pushed it in. He didn't bleed. He remembered. The world blurred, then reshaped. He wasn't in Moonwood anymore. He was inside something, a room, a mind, A self. It didn't matter. It was lined with memories, stacked like books, whispering to each other in languages only feelings understood. And in the center of it all stood a figure, thin, frayed, like a ragged cloth held together by longing. It wore Bramble's face, but not his age, not his kindness, not his hope, just his regret. "I'm the seam you didn't mend," the figure said softly. "I'm the choice you never made, the goodbye you never gave." Bramble stepped forward. "I don't even remember what I left behind." "That's because you sewed around me," the figure said. "Every time. You stitched the world back together, but never yourself." The room trembled. The memories leaned inward, not menacing, just watchful, waiting. "What happens if I stitch this one?" Bramble asked. The figure smiled. "You remember everything. You feel it all, and you stop running." Bramble hesitated. Then he nodded. He raised the needle, and the figure stepped into him, not with violence, but with welcome, a memory re-entering the body that forgot it. Pain lanced through him, but it was the true kind, the ache of stitching up a place that had long begged for closure. He saw his brother's face. He saw the moment he turned away from magic. He saw the promise he made as a child. "I'll never forget who I am," and he had, but not anymore. With the final stitch drawn tight, Bramble woke, not from sleep, but from forgetting. He was back in his cottage. The lantern glowed soft. The needle lay still in his lap, and outside, no eye blinked, no tear showed. In the sky, no hum stirred the wind, just quiet, true quiet. He'd mended the world, but more importantly, he'd mended himself. The cottage was quiet, no ripples in the sky, no knocking at the door, no strange lights in the woods, just the soft sound of a kettle boiling and Bramble writing. He sat at his old oak desk, the moonthorn needle resting beside him, its work finished, its glow gone, but still warm somehow. A parchment lay before him, edges curled ever so slightly. He dipped his quill and began the letter. "To whomever finds this, the world is stitched again, not perfectly, but truly. If you're reading this, you might be a dreamer, or a mender, or just someone who wandered too far and found something strange in the quiet. Good. We need wanderers. We need wonder. I've mended what I could, not just in the sky, but in myself. You'll feel the tears in the world sometimes. You'll hear the seams tug. That's not failure. That's life. And when the thread calls, I hope you listen. May your hands stay steady. May your dreams stay kind. And may you never forget, you are not the tear, you are the stitch. Bramble Tiddlepot." He folded the letter, tied it with red thread, slipped it into a little glass jar, and set it on the porch railing, where the morning birds might carry it, or a wanderer might find it. And then he walked, just once more through Moonwood. No needle, no lantern, just his cloak, his boots, and the memory of a life lived with care. He passed the stump where he'd found the note. It was blooming now, filled with mushrooms that hummed in sleep. He walked past the whispering stones, now silent. Past the dreaming tree, which no longer bled stories from its bark. He walked until the forest grew thin and the sky opened up. Not torn, not watchful, just blue. True, morning blue. He took one final breath and smiled. That night, Bramble didn't rock in his chair, didn't sip his tea. He climbed into bed, pulled the quilt to his chin, and whispered. All mended, the lantern dimmed, the wind hushed, and the world just rested. And so, for now, the forest is still, the sky is mended, and Bramble rests, as should you. If you're still awake, don't worry. The night is patient, and so are stories. Thank you for joining me here in the quiet. Until next time, sleep deeply, dream kindly, and never forget, you are not the tear, you are the stitch. Good night.